Okay, we're live. My name's Andy Junkin. This is the business culture of agriculture. And with me tonight is Reg Shandro. He's a farm succession mediator. And he does very similar work to me. It's great to be able to talk to somebody. You know, there's very few people across North America that do what Reg and I do. And so many few people, there's a lot of people that pretend to do what we do, but there's very few people that actually do what we do. And it's really good to be able to talk to Reg. Unfortunately, tonight, we've had 4 technical failures, and it's just been one of those nights where a few foul words were used, you could possibly use. But with us tonight, Reg is going to be visiting with us over my speakerphone. Unfortunately, this camera could not work. And Reg, could you say hello?
I'd say hello, and I think you're liberal with that fortune didn't work. If anybody wants to see a picture of me, they can go to my website, and it might be fortunate that the camera didn't work.
I've got a face for radio. That's all I know. So Reg, you're from, where are you calling from? Tell us about your business. What is it you do?
I'm Red Deer, Alberta, and for the past 12 years, I've got my own practice, and all I do is sit at kitchen tables and help farm families with the issues that they have. And my mantra is that I remove pain for farm families one table at a time. And you know, Andy, I mean, this is our 4th start, and everyone's different. But you made me think that you know, the reality around your opening is this. And my travels have been, there's 3 pivotal points that farmers have to deal with, and it pendulums back and forth depending on what journey you're on. But number one is the wallet. So the farmers will talk about the viability, sustainability, all the items around the economics of the farm operation, and it'll pendulum there. Can we afford that? What's our scalability, etc. And then it'll pendulum to the heart or to the head. Say what makes sense. So, you know, farm operation that works or doesn't work. So you get really cerebral thinking about their things, their farm situation. And the third is their heart. So I was forced about 6 years ago to go get my accreditation in mediation, because my travels that showed me and proved to me that the heart always trumps the wallet and always trumps the head. So the majority of the practice out there that I've seen, they neglect the heart, and you know, the communication and conflict piece. And Dr. David Irvine has done a study, and he says that over 80% of businesses do not transfer because of communication and conflict issues.
Absolutely.
So the technical component of the topic that we're dealing with, I mean, there's 22,500 accountants in Alberta. They'll find you structure, and there's 2 mediators that specialize in this thing. So, you know, I'm really, really, really passionate about the healing piece around families, and then the technical stuff falls out of those needs.
So how did you get into this?
My background is sorted. I mean, I mentioned to you before, Andy, that basically my life's work is back to 1978, when I was born and raised in the farm, and some of the succession issues that have been dealt with at a ground roots level, and carrying that through my life, and getting an ag degree, and being a banker across the provinces, and then working for an accounting firm, and then realizing that this was my life's path, and it's everything that I do, and it's just the most intriguing, intricate piece, and it's no better way to make a living when you can resolve the issues that present themselves. And when they don't work, it's somewhat tragic. And in light of that, if you're looking for a model, I was told years ago, there's 3 things that farm succession planning requires. Number 1 is time. Number 2 is decision making. Somebody has to make a decision. And by far and away, that's the biggest hang up in the journey that I've been in. And number 3 is that farmers have to reserve the right to reverse the decision if the decision turns out to be the wrong one. But I'll go back to the time, and you know, some of and I'm sure you've come across it, there's nothing worse than having to deal with a fresh widow when emotions are high, intelligence are low, because the emotions override that. And when you're dealing with a grieving widow trying to solve all the complexities of a farm operation, it's tough enough to figure this stuff out when everybody's in sound mind, let alone when they've got a grieving process to go through.
Big time.
So those are the most tragic cases that I have to deal with.
And have you ever dealt with a case where it was just an unexpected death, and trying to sort those situations? Man,
plenty. And you know, it's really debilitating, because you know, I mean, what happens in those scenarios is that everybody's lost somebody. So usually the mom's lost the husband, and the partners have lost the brother, and the sister-in-law's lost the brother-in-law. and everybody is in that painful process. And you know, with every change, there's shock, anger, rejection, acceptance, or 4 emotions that you go through.
Yeah.
And when somebody passes, suddenly they're in the shock, anger phase for quite a lengthy period of time. And sometimes you've got time frames that are pressing around maybe operations, spring work, maybe around the economics, maybe you know, so some of the loans that need to be paid. And when you got to deal with that, boy, it takes an empathic and compassionate soul to address these things and really kid gloves. I just had that last Friday where, you know, it's very sensitive to approach a widow who's still grieving, saying, yeah, but we still have to do with these issues, ...
Yes.
And there's some urgencies around them because it's you know, and you can understand that, and everybody can put their minds around that. But please, when you're dealing with your farm succession plan, give it as much time as you possibly can.
Yeah, and you just never know when it's going to happen, right? That's the crazy thing. What?
No, and the worst ones are, you know, I had 2 in my career where both mom and dad passed away at the same time, tragically. And
yeah.
When you've got the complexity to deal with and the proper protocols aren't there, then obviously, you know, common sense would tell you that those become very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I'm surprised by how many times I get called out for those. Like, I mean, I've had to take farms out of the hands of farmers like more times who are suicidal, more times than I've got fingers, and it's really interesting to meet somebody else who's been there too. So it's great.
Let's talk about that, you know, because, you know, I said before, life conditions blueprint, and you know, it's been my discovery that, and I would guess, and this it's clinically proven, but I would say around 20% of my files have some form of mental health attached to it.
Oh, everybody.
Depression, whether it's bipolarism, alcohol, drugs, whatever else. And again, it's tough enough to try and figure this out with sound minds at the table, but when you've got one of those to deal with, it's a specialty within itself. Well,
I think in every family thinks that they're the exception, right? But I mean, 30% of people in general society have mental health issues, and you know, I think that it's a pretty good, like whenever I walk onto a farm, especially one where, you know, when you have the stress of succession planning and the stress of a farm financial crisis, you know, it drives people crazy. And
well, it does. And you know, I'm not a neuropsychologist, but you know, I love the definition of happiness. Life conditions equal your blueprint. It's my opinion. If your life conditions don't equal your blueprint over a long period of time, it affects your neuropsychology, and then obviously you need some help. You know, whether it's medication or whatever else.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of farms that if you get them out of the circumstances, you know, obviously at some point they need to get medication and get things sorted out. But there's a lot of farmers won't seek medication, and it's just a matter of getting things sorted out so that the stress is not there in the operation, and that operations are structured. For instance, if somebody's manic depressive, operations are structured so you adapt rules in place where, you know, nobody makes equipment purchases without it being decided upon the month before, as far as part of the budgeting. Right?
Absolutely. And one of the 20 questions, are there formal agreements in place, or are they informal on a handshake basis?
Yeah.
And those formal agreements are paramount, because then you've got rules and regs around decision making when something like this happens.
Yeah.
I've had one, and obviously I can't do geographic, but you know, the patriarch was clinically depressed and not making sound decisions and running the operation into the ground.
Absolutely.
And there was no mechanism, because there's 2 mechanisms in Alberta. Number one is you've got to get that individual to self-declare mentally incapacitated.
Yeah,
Well,
which
one
rarely
ever
happens.
does that. And number 2 is you need a geriatric person to come in to do an assessment, and that takes 18 months. Well, a lot of wrong business decisions can happen in 18 months to drive the farms to the ground.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, these are smart individuals. They just need a bit of help, right? So I find if you eliminate the stress, and you get a really sound structure in place, and you get policies and procedures in place, you know, they can go see a psychiatrist on their own time, I guess you'd say.
Well, so, and you know, you're with the definition of stress, and the definition of stress is load over support. So when, you know, and it's often in my travels, the word stress is used. And when you break it down to load over support, then you have to ask the question, do you have too much load or do you have not enough support, or both?
Both.
So when you isolate that down, then you can really specify, saying, you know what, I don't have enough support, my family, blah, 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 or way too much load. And then you got to right size their structure or get, the problem with farming is that, there's economic constraints, and we sometimes try to be all things to all people. And in light of that, there's way too much load. And that's a 20-minute conversation itself. When you don't like bookkeeping and when you have to do bookkeeping, don't do bookkeeping. And the saying to that is, sometimes it's better to hire than sire. Reduce the load, reduce the stress.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement. Give us an example of a typical. What ages are you seeing most farm families approach you about succession planning? What's that?
Well, that's a great question. And I have my demographics, and here's been my experience. If your first digit's a 4, and I've got two 48-year-old men with their 18 and 19-year-old sons pressing them, a succession plan isn't going to happen. When your first digit's a 5, it's not going to happen unless you have defined who you're going to be in the after picture and reinvent yourself. I have 3 50-some-year-olds, and I know you're a high-faith person. Each of those individuals are going to go on missions and identify themselves after farming. So by having that identity, they've prepped these successors for that. If your first digit's a 6, you're going to start to think about it. And until you lose mental or physical resources, then you're not going to be prompted or accelerated into making those decisions. And the answer to your question is somewhere between 65 and 75 is the range where majority of my clients would fall into. And then my trailing comment to that is, if your first digit's an 8 or 9, you're crazy. To start to deal with that, I mean, the sensitivities, I dealt with a 91-year-old last year, and the sensitivities around that intergenerational traits and with trust, and why do we need that, and handshake, it was going to be a $14 million wreck. Things in place, because number one thing with that generation is you have to establish your trust, and you're not going to do that within the timeline of it takes a long time. So, again, the timelines, I understand the 50 thing, but boy, by the time you're 60, you should, and there's a chosen successor or a willing successor to come back, then that's where it should gel.
And I think that the biggest thing that a lot of farmers don't recognize is that back in the 60s, when Dad was 60, his hips were done. But nowadays, when Dad's 60, Dad's getting hip replacement surgery and farming for another 20 years. The question is, how do you get everybody working together as a team? And do you do that, or do you just focus on getting the assets to the next generation, or what's your philosophy towards that? As far as
well, I mean, that's a great comment, because years ago I was doing a presentation and I had a bell curve around it's labor, observer, part owner, owner, and then on the flip side of that, you transfer it out as a part owner, and then you turn into a labor and observer. So within that curve, there is I was always on my mind, and I bet you your filters are somewhat clouded because of the nature of what we deal with, so it's a bit darker than the average population. And I was doing a presentation, and the fella challenged me on that. He says, "Don't do that." I said, "Do what?" And he says, "Don't put them out to pasture and observe."
Exactly.
And I said, "You name me one farm family that has went 4th generation happy." He goes, "Have you heard of Cargill?" And he started naming off these very successful corporations, farming corporations. And I said, "Well, that's interesting." And I went back and retreated. And here's the difference. I found out that if you don't have proper communication and conflict mechanisms to deal with your situation, and if you don't have standard operating procedures with jurisdictions and start to finish responsibilities, prepare for a wind down. So the differentiation of the two is to have those pieces implemented. And tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, I'm doing a presentation and implementation of a communication strategy for a farm family, and it's called herd management, and herd is HEARD, herd management and family stampede control. So you don't know what you don't know, so these pieces are going to need to be implemented. And I'm finding more like 14, 13, 12 years ago, I used to teach standard operating procedures and business and vision, and it was somewhat neglected. And I'm finding more and more farmers now are realizing the importance of doing that and plugging in those things so their farms are successful.
That's awesome. And so give us an example of a daughter-in-law issues that you've worked with, and and give us a use case scenario of a daughter-in-law situation which was going badly and how you're able to turn that around.
Oh, I love it. I love your question. You know, I can write 2 chapters in the book about stories about daughter-in-laws, but you know, the reality is in this topic we're dealing with it. Again, years ago, I did a presentation. There was an elderly couple in the back of the room, and they kept talking about their horrific daughter-in-law who's a hairdresser. And every 5 or 10 minutes, they'd tell a story about how bad she was. And then I asked a question to them. I said, how long has she been your daughter-in-law? And they said 28 years. And then the whole room burst out laughing. That was pre-mediation, so I was in the judgmental phase. And I said, you know, after 28 years, she doesn't have the problem, you have the problem. In every conflict, there's a victim and villain. So the question around daughter-in-laws is at what stage in their lives are they more entitled to the farm operation than non-farming blood? And the other question around daughter-in-laws is that, you know, sometimes I've seen in my travels that the founders or grandparents forget that their daughter-in-laws are always going to be the children of, are always going to be the mother of their grandchildren.
Exactly.
So in haste, when emotions are high, they do some things to affect the daughter-in-law, and right or wrong, but what they do is inadvertently affect the lifestyle of their grandchildren.
Yeah.
So, you know, and in the same breath, I mean, I can take both sides of this coin, but you know, why do I insist that the daughter-in-laws are at the table when we have our farm family meetings? And the reality is they have leverage over their husbands, and they can change their husband's journey, and we can change this. And I should pause and, you know, flip the coin over again, Andy. It's not just daughter-in-laws. We're being gender biased here. It's also son-in-laws with the flip of the coin.
Big time.
So I love the story, and I don't know, I mean, if you're familiar with Hutterian Brethren, but you know, why are the daughter-in-laws at the table? And years ago, there was a Hutterite fella giving a presentation in Farm Tech, and the lady in front was giving him a hard time about this and that, and their communal lifestyle. And she asked the question, why don't women get a vote in the colony? He walked up to her and he got angry, and he says, I told you that everything that happens in the colony is because of the Bible, and the Bible says God, man, woman, child, period. So women, they don't get a vote, and that's why they don't get a vote. And then he went up to the podium and he put his glasses down on his nose, and he says, but you know, in reality, we all know that when we get home, we get told exactly how to vote. And that's why the daughter-in-law needs to be at the table, because they're the ones who are influencing their husband's votes. And, you know, the most powerful meetings we've had, and the flip side of that, Andy, is, you know, sometimes these daughter-in-laws are non-farming in-laws for, you know, to sober up the room by their perspectives of some of the idiosyncrasies that are going on in the farm operation would absolutely not be sustainable in the non-farming business world, and they're dumbfounded as to how these techniques have even developed. So, you know, I like live theater. I don't like I don't like to pre-survey people. I just like everybody at the table. And if you know this, if you're trained in mediation, you should be able to handle the room so that everybody feels like they've been heard, and everybody gets a chance to speak. And like you said, there's some individuals out there who think that they can, but you know, years ago I had a tax accountant tell me, you know, when it comes to this mediation conflict management thing, I've got this natural ability to do it. And I looked at her and I said, you know, from what I know about conflict management communication, it's the most intricate thing you're going to have to deal with. And if I made the comment to you, if I had a natural ability to understand the Tax Act, that's how stupid your comment sounded to me. There's a lot of tools and templates that need to be understood. And the mantra of mediation is do no harm. And on the flip side of that is, you know, there's logical steps. And then my logical steps in my process is make sure conflict and communication are taken care of. And then the one thereafter is the financial component and understanding your financial numbers.
Yeah.
And step 4 is going to your accountant. Going to your accountant is a distractant because it takes away from having to have that conversation and doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah. And I think that there's so many family farms that everybody's focused on the transfer of assets. Nobody's looked at the transfer of management. And
absolutely.
And you know, and nobody's thought about, rather than why talk about succession planning until you got a good successor. And
and that's the, you know, the reality is, and with all the professionals that claim, I'll tell you right, I don't do succession planning. I know that you do succession planning, and I haven't met anybody in my travels around the world that does succession planning, because there's no way you can have all the aptitudes that are required to do a succession plan.
Yeah.
There's no one individual. You need a team approach, and it's difficult to get that together. And once I've been successful in some silos to get that together, and it's absolutely miraculous to get everybody to leave their egos at the door. But we're all biased. And when I had a managing partner in a tax firm saying, everybody knows that a succession plan is a tax plan and that's it. Well, my blood gets a little warm because they do harm when they go in, and inadvertently they got to come back and deal with that issue later on after the technical pieces are sorted out, and they're important. But again, I say they're distracting.
And do you want to talk about the succession planning industry just a little bit so farmers can know? You and I had a offline. We were discussing about people with ulterior motives, and you want to discuss what you've seen quite often with succession planning industry and how a lot of people are made suckers or are made led astray, I guess you'd say, and how that impacts a family farm.
Well, I think that's a great observation / comment, and what led me into my practice 12 years ago.
Yeah, same with me.
It's very much. I mean, it's still to this day a frustration for the ag communities to try and figure out the succession planning thing. It's kind of like the word aloha. It means everything to everybody.
Yeah.
If you go to Hawaii, but it's diluted. So, in that rate, it's designing the business practice around. And I'm not going to trivialize anybody's importance. A lawyer does wills.
Yeah, absolutely.
An accountant does tax. An insurance guy sells insurance. And an investment guy sells investments. And the disturbing thing, and then maybe it's a good thing, is very much buyer beware, because when somebody says I do succession planning, the question around that is, which specific component of succession planning do you do? So you go online, you type succession planning, and you get dead ends in some of the financial institutions. We do succession planning, but it's specific to one bunny trail. And then I really understand why farmers get frustrated, because after the 11th bunny trail, they get paralyzed and saying, well, what is this topic about, and who actually does it? So you need a team approach, and it doesn't fit into some business models to have a mediator on staff, because there's some limitations around the business model there as to what, the Tax Act can dictate a $350 to $450 an hour guy. Yeah. And value is quantified by perceived benefit over cost. So if an accountant says to you, I'm going to save you $1.1 million for an $80,000 invoice, the business mind is going to lean towards that, where when you're mediating or solving conflict, you can't quantify the value of it. So the perceived benefit is absolutely priceless. And I've had a lot of moms who inadvertently are the referees and mediators in the farm family. Yeah. Dad goes to them, kids go to them. They got the checkbook out halfway through the meeting because you just replaced their needs.
Well, and I've had families where they bought one of my books and asked me a lot of questions, but never had me out to the family of operation. And they're like, these operations, multi-million-dollar farms, like decent-sized operations, where mom says, I'm going to be the mediator, or dad says, I'm going to be the mediator and the chairman. And, so they saved, a couple $100 for me not to come out to the farm to help them. But I mean, they don't get together for Christmas anymore. It's just absolutely,
it's that Einstein thing. And I mean, I'm not a poet. I'm as agrarian as anybody else, but I have made a poem, and I'm going to tell it to you.
I'd love it.
I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know. And if I pretend to know what I don't know, the people who know will know that I don't know.
Absolutely.
So when somebody says they got this inadvertent skills, again, I'm really sensitive to this, obvious passion about it, because the mantra of mediation is do no harm. And there's no possible way that you can be a hog specialist 1 month and live in the agriculture world, and then 3 months later, you're a succession planning specialist selling insurance. I really get sensitive to that, because it impacts negatively the farm clients who are in dire need of assistance from time to time.
And it also, I mean, how many families don't get there for Christmas because somebody falsely advertised themselves, right?
Yeah, I know it would take some research to figure that out.
If there's no way we find it, Andy. But it's I get upset. That's what gets me upset. But anyways, let's go on. Let's stop talking about that. Let's go on to the next topic. As far as if you have a son and daughter coming home with a family operation, just from college or from their careers, what is the recommendations you'd have in order to help them put systems in place? What are 2 or 3 simple things they can do that just make common sense that they can do to avoid ever needing a mediator like you and I?
Okay, so I love it. I mean, so one of the 20 questions is, has the successor experienced time away from the farm to enhance their skill set and broaden their scope?
Absolutely.
So I think if you're looking for an insurance policy, they get minimum 3 to 5 years away from the farm after post-secondary education.
Yeah.
So when they broaden their scope and come back to the farm, then one of 2 things, they'll either know how good it is or how bad it is and what needs to be fixed. So I think if you're setting a foundation of tools, I mean, I continually get challenged, and there's a flip side to this, and I can argue both sides, but not effectively on the second one. Sometimes when there's a matriarch or patriarch who's a world-class business person, that successor coming back to the farm early and learning from them is a powerful tool. But by and away, the large majority is they have to go away and leave.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens is the demographics, Andy, where you got a 40-year-old son and you got a 40-year-old dad and a 20-year-old son, and he comes back 7 years early. They're in each other's faces and they amp up their emotions. And, there's some good articles written about that, and they eventually leave if they don't have good conflict management mechanism put into place. So by far and away, broadening the successor's horizons would be the absolute best foundation to deal with things. Okay, and number 2 in that would be the network. Okay, finding out who's out there and who's doing things right and who's doing things wrong. And, the level of learning from your peers, sharing those tools. I've seen some fantastic things happen in that.
What's the third point you'd have?
Oh, that's a broad question.
Sure.
Yeah, my son's taking commerce right now, and I said as soon as you're done, you're heading into mediation school, and you're going to take 278 hours of training in order to understand the human dynamic of what you need to do, and the combination of technical and soft skills would absolutely just rock the farm.
Yep. That's very interesting. And what are common problems that you see so many family farms have that they never openly discuss in the community, and as a result, you just don't hear about it until things kind of have blown up? What are common problems that have been avoided on most family operations?
Well, there's a myriad of them, but the one that came to mind with me is your identity, where there's a saying around this is, when is it that you can transition from the role of a father to the role of a friend, or the role of a mother to the role of a friend? Because what happens is these blended lines between dad and son, or dad and daughter, or whatever, I mean, do the derivatives. But at the end of the day, they're not being treated like business partners, and they're still being oppressed into the ages of 40-something, and then get depressed by being oppressed over a long period of time. So those roles and rules, like last week I was farm client, and there was a very domineering patriarch, and this is the way things are going to be. And then the other lethal part of that plan was there's this finish line, and then you guys can all have this up to this point in time. I'm going to make all these decisions. Well, the best way to do this is to tier. I mean, any business out there, they don't have carte blanche vice presidents. You've got 7 or 8 steps in order to get to that level where you're qualified.
Yes.
So that would be my response to that question.
I would agree with that. Well, do you have any presentation? You want to tell folks how they can look your website up and find out more about you? Do you have any books or any products like that that you have on Amazon, or?
Well, I suffer the same problem as farmers do, and I've got 189 unique stories written down. But the problem is I'm doing chores as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one day when I slow down enough to write books and do what Winston Churchill had a great saying, and I very much suffer from that. But one day I'll slow down, and his premise is this: a task without a vision is just a job. A vision without a task is just a dream, and a vision with a task can change the world.
Yeah.
So I've been dreaming and hallucinating, and one day I'm going to have to sit down and And, you know, my speaking style is never have a story without a point and never have a point without a story, because, you know, the theory around items get lost. You have to emotionally process things in order to retain them. And I do that by telling thousands of stories based on my travels.
Yeah.
And the other thing that that does, Andy, is that it desensitizes situations. So if you're sitting at a farm and there's an amperage because of a topic, I always tell a story about another farm and categorize it so they get the message without getting offended.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've been fortunate to build the reputation I have, and then the advertising piece is not paramount. I do have a website, www.redshandro.com.
Yeah.
The name of my company is Pharmacist, because my wife is a pharmacist.
Okay.
And it's what it is, and I thoroughly enjoy it without having to go out there and beat the bushes for business.
Sounds great. And what's your phone number? If you could say it twice, I'd appreciate that.
You're going to test my intelligence?
Yeah, that's fine.
403-391-8734. 403-891-8734.
Okay, Reggie.
The other thing, Andy, I just trail is that along
Yeah.
the way, a guy, you know, this topic is a very, very sensitive and emotional one, but along
Yeah.
the way, I prize myself with having fun. And
Yeah.
some of the lawyers I deal with said, how in the world do you get your clients to laugh during an estate planning when they're drawing up their will?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's an art, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I've said to you in our previous conversation, the shelf life of this topic is inevitable. If you put it away, it usually comes back in a form that's more rotten, and then it becomes more expensive to heal.
Absolutely. Well, Reg, I really appreciate. I'd really like to have you back on the show later this quarter. It's great talking to you. And for anybody who wants to get a hold of Reg, his phone number again is 403-391-8734. My name is Andy Junkin. This has been Reg Shandro with redshandro.com. His company's name is Pharmacist. My name is Andy Junkin. My company is called Agriculture Strategy. And you take care and God bless.